Morning. It's good to be here with you today, all the way from the far south, or Croydon as it's called. My name is Claire and I'm the minister of New Addington Baptist Church, which is on an estate at the end of a tram line in south east London, just on the border between Surrey and Kent. I've lived here for over a year now. But before that I was minister of a church just north of Manchester in a place called Ramsbottom. The move couldn't have been further unless I'd ended up in France, I think. But I wasn't called to speak French. I was just called to try and understand the strange eccentricities of the ways of South East London. You may know me better as Sarah's sister. Now, I haven't always been a minister in my previous life or in the real world as we know it. I was a maths teacher and I love maths, and I really don't groan about it because it's one of the most beautiful things in the world. For some reason, maths has a really bad reputation and the world thinks it's normal not to try maths because being not okay at maths is quite fashionable, really. And so I had this problem when I taught that many people didn't even want to try. My first year 7 class, there was a girl, she sat right in front of me and she declared, "My mum isn't good at maths, I am not good at maths, and that's just the way it is," which was lovely. However, that girl went on to get a C at GCSE, so she can't have been that bad. When we lose our passion for something, when things distract us, we don't always try, do we? We actually don't always listen. Marking maths work is a bit of an adventure sometimes. They didn't get it right, but they're convinced they've got it sorted. How did they do it? Where did they get that idea from? What common misconception are they demonstrating here? That's not the way they were taught. You have to keep reminding of the basics. Keep going back to the methods that are right. Keep repeating over and over again the concepts behind what they're doing. And they need to keep persevering so that they can get better. For the girl in my year 7 class, she did that and she got better and she did well and was able to go on to do all the things that she wanted to do. When I said that's not the way you were taught, she would probably moan a little bit sometimes, but she would try again, apart from the one time she got her mum in to shout at me. She was in a bad mood that day. That's another story. And it's the same with any challenge set before us. If we don't persevere, if we let ourselves get distracted, if we're not in the mood, if we have a distorted view on how we are doing and how good we are at it, we're not going to get to go to the place that we need to be going. It's like a malfunction on a sat-nav, a bit of the map ripped out because you accidentally put sellotape in the wrong place. And sometimes you might even just pick up the wrong map. And this is what we come to in the verses in Ephesians I've been asked to look at today. We're in the middle of a commentary and an unpacking of chapter 4, verse 1, where the writer exhorts the readers to live a life worthy of the calling they've received. They've gone through what it means to be a healthy member of the body, but now we come as individuals. What is it we have to do to be good disciples of Christ, to live that life worthy of the calling that we've received? So here we are. I'm going to read Ephesians chapter 4, verses 17 to 24. So I tell you this, and insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their thinking. They are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. Having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity, and they are full of greed. That, however, is not the way of life you learned. When you heard about Christ and were taught in him in accordance with the truth that is in Jesus, you were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which has been corrupted by its deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. So this passage is a bit like a recap lesson in what the Gentile Christians should know. They know all this is about Christ. They know that they should be living in a certain way. But what does that look like? It suggests that they have been taught how to live as Christians, and that involves change and that it involves a new way of thinking. However, that they are not necessarily doing that. And there's a challenge in there. Verse 20, that's not what you learned. What are you doing to yourselves? You know what the right way to live is, however, you're not doing the greatest of jobs. You've been told to look to Christ for your example. You're probably looking more at the world. You've got to decide, are you going to do this, or are you going to let your community and God down by actually not trying? It's a place where the readers are encouraged to make good choices. This is how it is. What's your choice going to be? They're encouraged to follow good morals and make sensible and thought through ethical decisions. They're told that their life should look different to the world around because they are followers of Christ. It's something they already knew, but now they need to actively put it into action. If we are a follower of Christ, there should be something about us that marks us out as different. In our response to others and the frustrations of others and how that affects us, there must be something about us that marks us out as different. And in our response to what is going on in the world right now, there must be something about us that marks us out as different. That is what we've been taught. It's laid down on the table, so I tell you this, and insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do. So Gentiles, perhaps we can substitute that for the world or society or the people around you who are not followers of Jesus. Don't conform to the patterns of this world. We've heard that one before in Romans 12, one of my favourite passages. Seek to be different, not in a woo way, but in a way that embodies the ethics and morals and truth of the gospel. It should be a complete change. It should be changed from the inside out. And the first half of the passage explains what those things are that we should be getting rid of. The bad attitude things, the self-centered things, the I don't even need to try things. I'm all right as I am things. And it explains that it involves a change in mindset. We need to not be futile thinkers. We need to be bothered about this. We need to believe and recognise that there is more to life than this. If we just focus on now, happiness now, and particularly just our own happiness now, then we miss the bigger picture. If we have no meaning, we have no hope. The book of Ecclesiastes put it so well. Everything is meaningless. We're born, we live, we die. But actually there's more than that. If we believe in restoration, if we believe the promise of God's kingdom, the promise that there will be a new heaven and a new earth, we need to live like it's coming and bring little bits of it as we signpost it to others. If we have hope that things can change, we can be the change bringers. But that involves setting our mind to it. And if we set our mind to something where we say, well, we are not going to change this, then nothing will change. Once our mindset is changed, that will be lived out in our actions. In the way that we love God, in the way we love our neighbour as ourselves. That takes hard work and commitment. It's a choice to not focus inwards, but to look up and around. That's the way we're taught by Jesus. We need to not be ignorant or insensitive, either of God or of others. We need to not be darkened in our understanding. I don't know about you, but the influx of news over the last few months has been overwhelming. Some of it has made us really sad. Some of it has made us really angry. Some of it has made us like and share too quickly. Our inability to fact check astounds me sometimes. Our inability to check ourselves does too. What are we saying? How are we writing it? Do we realise there is a person affected by what we're saying? What are we reading? What is its source? Do we realise there is truth to be found somewhere? A follower of Christ is bothered with truth, is bothered that their actions affect others, is bothered about thinking things through. We need to not be selfish. It says in the passage, having lost all sensitivity, they've given themselves over and they are full of greed. One of the most troubling things at the beginning of lockdown was the fights, wasn't it, over toilet roll and pasta. What had our society come to? What had the world come to? It's still difficult to get some things that we want. Yet whilst many stocked their spare room with rolls and rolls of paper, others were queuing for the one pack they could afford at that moment, queuing again the next day when the money eventually came in. When we're faced with uncertainty and change, we slip into challenging behaviour. Whilst this virus has brought out the best in many, it's brought out the worst in many others too. A follower of Christ is bothered about others, is concerned about their behaviour, and looks beyond themselves. These things, they are all things we've learned. They all make sense because moralistically and ethically they make sense. That's because they are integral to the world God created, to the human beings he created us to be. We're made in his image. Yet so often he must look at us and say, but that's not what I taught. It's all wrong. Let's have a look at what we were taught in the second half of the passage now. We were taught to live according to the truth. We were taught to put off our old self and put on new. Not just putting a belt on, taking your cardigan off and changing your shoes to move from day to night, but a brand new set of clothing. We were taught to seek righteousness and holiness and to keep on seeking it. Now, I live on an estate where the brokenness of the world is so evident. It's difficult not to encounter that brokenness when you walk out your door. New Addington has a bad reputation. It's built to solve the problem of overcrowding, but then it became a problem in itself. The brokenness is in your face. People don't hide behind their masks like many of us do. All of those things that are talked about in this passage, all of the things people are doing that they haven't been taught, the results of that are evident, and that's because these things haven't been taught for a long time. It's in the response to the estate itself. When something is seen as simply a problem, the hope is taken away. If we can't see that there is hope of restoration for all, not just in them finding Jesus, but in finding signs of his kingdom here on earth right now, then we end up stuck. One thing we're trying to do as a church is to give people hope that there is more than this. We're called to be restorers, restoring people to a place of honour and not of shame. That's the new life that this passage calls us to. It's all in the attitude of people to those who are struggling to find work and to feed their families. If you look at New Addington from the outside, you might wonder how there can be so many people with mental health issues and who are reliant on food banks. Understand the inside and you begin to recognise that this is the result of decades of neglect, of clashes with authority, of not having stories heard. One thing that we need to do as Christians is not to label people, not be ignorant to their plight and why they've ended up where they are. We're called to be people of love and of compassion, who stand up for the rights of the oppressed, seeking truth and not believing lies. That's the new life that this passage calls us to. It's in the lives of the broken families who live on the estate, where people have looked for ways out by satisfying their own desires. It only contributes to the brokenness. Where there have been no good role models and mentors, how can people know that there is more than what they are experiencing right now? And how can they know how to get there? One thing we need to be as Christians is signposts to a new way of thinking. We're called to be people who signpost the kingdom of God in our attitudes, in our minds, and in our behaviour. If we seek to live the life of holiness and righteousness that we're called to, then that can only have a positive effect on those around. Where there is conflict, we should seek peace. Where there is pain, we should seek healing. Where there is nothing, we should offer abundance. That's the new life that this passage calls us to. We all have questions to answer. We all have challenging mindsets on certain issues. We probably drive ourselves mad. We all have things we are doing that are sinful, but we can all change. How? Well, that's expanded on as we continue to read through Ephesians, but we know what we should be doing. Why? Because of Christ. That is the way we have been taught. Amen.